to take just a moment to inject a Rotary moment, because unfortunately we don't have one this morning. So I'd like you just quietly ponder what we as a club have done recently to make the world a better place. Maybe the thought of Pipsico would come across your mind. Maybe dictionaries and to keep your chin up might come to our minds. Maybe a fun time together as we float around the harbor, underway, by the way. The bigger picture, we are really, really close to accomplishing what I think is an absolutely unbelievable accomplishment. Rotary. That's us. Glenella, would you please introduce our speaker?
Mike Potter graduated from George Mason many years ago.
Many, yeah.
His real life, money-making life, he was a community banker and accountant and a consultant. But for 40 years, he's been flying all different kind of aircraft. He's instrument-rated private pilot. He's involved with the Warbirds. I'm sure you've heard of those. And he's had the privilege of flying in famous aircraft such as the B-17 Flying Fortress, P-24 Liberator, PBY Catalina, P-51 Mustang, and the last B-29 Super Fortress. He started out being a volunteer out at the Aviation Museum, and in December, right?
I was a volunteer for 4 years and became director in December.
Became director. At the last road, not the last road rally, but the road rally from last year, which was out in Pungo, the end of it, I went and spent 3 hours at this place. And it's a hidden secret. If you haven't been out there, you need to go. There's a great, one hangar is nothing but mostly German aircraft, old World War I and not even and previous, right? So without further ado, Mike, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Show of hands, how many of you have been to our museum? Whoa! I've never seen that many hands go up. Wednesday, yesterday, and today, we've had 55 fifth graders from Creeds Elementary with us. We formed a model partnership with them. And I asked them to raise their hands on Wednesday morning. I said, how many of you have not been to the museum? Well, every hand but two went up out of 55 kids, and they live in our backyard. So that's our challenge. People come from all over the world to see our museum. They plan their vacations around it. But 90% of the people who live in Hampton Roads have no clue what's behind the dinosaurs on Princess Anne Road. All right, if you'd hit the slide, please. I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough on the museum since you've all been there. Go ahead. That's what we look like from the air. 8 years ago, there was nothing there except 5,000 feet of grass runway and 105 acres. That's all come out of the ground in 8 years, thanks to Jerry and Elaine Yeager. Go ahead. Obviously, we're the Mid-Atlantic gateway. A lot of our visitors come through the Dulles, D.C. corridor. We get 35,000 guests a year. That's nothing compared to the aquarium. But for 5 miles south of the Pungo Light, I guess that's not bad. Go ahead. That's our original building. It was built 8 years ago, 65,000 square feet of display space. Even our water tower is authentic. We pulled it out of an old Army Air Corps base from 1937 down in Tennessee, took it apart, numbered the pieces, brought it up here and put it back together, and that now feeds our sprinkler system. Again, the main museum, at one of our events, we do about 150 events a year, everything from weddings to retirement ceremonies, change of command, you name it. We've got 4 different events going on this weekend. There's the iconic P-51 Mustang, probably the most popular, most familiar plane out there. We're a unique museum. We fly our airplanes. There are no ropes or barriers around them. Kids can walk right up to them. You know, Dad can lift them up and stare into the cockpit. You can't do that at the Smithsonian. So it's pretty cool. You just have to watch out for the oil in the drip trays and don't walk into a propeller. There's our beautiful Skyraider and Corsair, both painted up in Navy colors. Obviously, this is a Navy town, so we've got a lot of Navy airplanes. We're only about a 7 seconds flight from the Atlantic Ocean, so it's obviously very scenic out there. Go ahead. This is what we euphemistically call our Army hangar, but basically we stuff things in wherever we can find a hole. And we're already out of space. We have about 65 airplanes on site. We are the largest collection in the world of World War I and World War II airplanes that still fly. So it is a unique place. It's our Navy hangar. We'll talk about the airplanes individually. Go ahead. This is our West End complex. A lot of people have never seen these buildings. On the lower right is our World War I hangar. That's the kind of building that the British were building in France, 1915, 1916. We found the plans for that building in the basement of the Royal Air Force Museum in Hampton, England, and we built it as authentically as we can. Notice it's called an airplane shed, and obviously you're going to put airplanes in a building. You don't want many vertical sticks in the way of parking airplanes. So there are very few vertical supports inside the building. So how does the building shed the weight of the roof? They built their hangars the same way they built their cathedrals, with flying buttresses that take that weight down into the ground. The middle building is our fighter factory, where the magic happens. We'll talk a little bit more about that, and our hot bus hangar that we'll also talk about. We've got about 12.5 World War I airplanes. They are all reproductions. As you can imagine, there aren't many World War I planes made out of fabric and wood that are still flying. There are a couple. We only have one real World War I airplane. That's her. That's a Curtiss Jenny, built in 1918 and still flying. We'll talk about some of these planes as we go through. Good. There's our fighter factory. So I said this is where the magic happens. We've got about 8 or 9 full-time FAA certified mechanics. All of our planes have to be inspected annually, whether they fly or not. They need annuals, they need maintenance. We don't do much restoration here because that's far too specialized. And if it's something, it's like the mechanics say, if it's something you can buff out, we'll do it. If it's more serious than that, we're going to send it somewhere. But these guys, they're just phenomenal. On any given day, they might be changing out a cylinder on a radial engine from a World War II fighter. The next day, they may be hand sewing fabric on a World War I airplane. The range of their knowledge is astonishing. In 1934, this building was built in Cottbus, Germany. It's a Luftwaffe hangar. It was built to house a flight school for the then secret German Air Force in 1934. During the war, it was actually used to construct and assemble German daytime fighters, like the Focke-Wulf 190 Butcherbird. It was about ready to be bulldozed for an office park in Cottbus. We found out about it. We went over there, we photographed it, numbered the pieces, took it apart, brought it over to the United States, sandblasted the rust of the paint off of it, and that's what it looks like today. This building was bombed by American bombers in 1944. You can still see some of the bomb damage that we'll point out on a tour. And when we were scraping the rust off of these original Krupp's steel beams, we found an inscription on one. The only labor available to repair the bomb damage from the American bombing raid, excuse me, was slave labor from a Polish concentration camp about a mile down the road. And I have a tough time with it, sorry. Etched into the back of one of the beams was a man's name, Anusia Waclaw. I worked here October 4th, 1945. We do a lot of events over here. Good. We just had the Porsche Club last weekend. A lot of car rallies, car clubs, motorcycle clubs. We'll rent our space for the day. We got a great big beer tasting coming up with Young Veterans Brewery in a couple of weeks. So it's just a great venue. I mean, it's just nothing but grass and trees and quiet, unless we're flying some people. Go ahead. This is our Navy hangar as it will look about a month from now as we empty it out, and all the railroad clubs from all over Hampton Roads bring their gear in and set up these huge displays, some of which the kids can actually run. We call it Trains, Planes, and Santa. We carefully arranged with Canadian Air Defense officials in NORAD to pick up Santa somewhere north of the Canadian border and fly him in about noon. And the poor guy spends the next 5.5 hours with every kid within 10 miles of Congo on kids have a wonderful time. This is a charity event, a plane pull. That young lady, or actually I guess that's a young man on the bottom left, and the two young ladies on the top and right. The Mustang, I think, weighs about 5,000 pounds. That Skyraider weighs 10,800 pounds. And one guy is pulling that thing. I think he went in for double hernia surgery. Go ahead. We do a wine classic, a lot of single events during the year. This is what the field looks like during the busiest time of year, our biggest show, Warbirds Over the Beach. It's always the third weekend in May. Certainly one of the largest air shows in the country, and is the largest air show in the world that we know of, flying off of grass. I don't think there's any place on this planet where you can get closer to an air show. There's the runway, there's the crowd line. It's not like Oceana, like you're going. Good. We have a couple of hundred reenactors every year of all nationalities, so it's a great educational opportunity for kids to talk to these folks. The opening act is usually a parachute drop from a cargo plane or a bomber. Every year, we've had a mishap of some sort, usually just sprains, occasionally a broken bone. Last year, I think we had high winds, and I think that the entire stick of jumpers, it was either last year or the year before, came down in trees that were too high for the fire department to even reach them. The year before that, we had to invent the Military Aviation Museum Navy, because two of them came down in a retention pond. We do some great entertainment, some Andrew's sister acts. There are several of them up and down the East Coast, and they're all great. Reenactors again for the kids to talk to. Valentine's Day is one of the most popular events. It's almost always a sellout, and this year, Valentine's Day is on Saturday the 13th, so that's our party. Almost everybody comes in costume in their zoot suits or rented costumes or uniforms. We have about a 12-piece swing band, and we bring swing dancers out about a half hour before the dance to teach the crowd how to swing dance, so everybody has a wonderful time. Flying proms, only two places on the planet you can see this. One's in England and one's in Pungo. How about that? We bring an entire symphony orchestra out to the field in the middle of the grass on 105 acres. A beautiful tree line, and all nice quiet out there. People bring their picnic baskets and beach chairs. And about an hour before dark, the orchestra strikes up, and they play music from aviation-related movies, like 12 O'Clock High or Battle of Britain or, whatever, High and the Mighty. And while they're playing the music, we fly the planes in an aerial ballet. It's really wonderful. As it gets dark, the planes land and they taxi right up to the crowd line, so the crowd can all come out and talk to the pilots and look at the planes while they're drinking their Chablis. And the second half of the concert is, Boston Pop's typical orchestra. And we end with some of the flying before the sunset. We end with what's got to be the biggest fireworks spectacular I've ever seen in Virginia Beach. It's just amazing to have this going on 5 miles south of Pungo. Okay. We do a lot of kid stuff. I told you about the group I brought up this week, the model partnership that's making a lot of waves. We have a school board member with us on Wednesday. We hired basically the entire 5th grade, 65 kids at Creeds Elementary, as our advisors for the rest of the year. We gave them shirts with their school logo and our museum wings on it, and if they wear that to the museum for the rest of the school year, they get it for free while they're studying and doing research. One of our big problems is, how do you talk to kids? What kind of messages do kids hear? How do you get the message out to kids of that age? So they're making media for us. They're shooting video with iPads all over our museum and at their school. We're going to their school. We were there yesterday. So they're going to be playing these videos in the library and sending them out over YouTube. So kids will be telling kids about our museum. We do summer camps, Boy Scouts, everything. We do a week-long camp. The kids get to crawl through some of the airplanes, launch model rockets, fly flight simulators, learn about flying as a potential career. It's a lot of fun. Radio control clubs love our place because of the grass runway. Some of these planes are amazing. Some of them are half scale. I mean, we're talking like 9-foot wingspans. Must have like $30,000 or $40,000 in it. That makes for a pretty expensive lawn dart. I mean, it happens almost every year. Some are just astonishing. This is one of our hammer tops. We got one coming up on November 2nd. We'll bring in an aviation personality, and they'll talk about their experience during the war, their training, and their time in the air. And we will end the day by flying one of the planes that was appropriate to their career. On November 7th, we have 3 gentlemen. Well, first of all, we have a book author, Adam Makos. 2-3 years ago, he wrote a book called A Higher Call. Excuse me. A Luftwaffe pilot who chose not to kill 10 men in a B-17. He escorted them home back to Hampton because they were lost. It became an international bestseller, and his new book is called Devotion. It's about 2 men, Tom Hudner and Jesse Brown. Jesse Brown was the first black man in naval aviation. They were both flying in Korea, flying Corsairs. Jesse was shot down by ground fire. Tom knew he was going to freeze to death within a couple of hours. You could see that Jesse was still alive. So he intentionally crash landed his Corsair in the snow next to Jesse to try to extract him. Couldn't get it done. The plane had Jesse just entombed in the plane. But they spent Jesse's last 10 minutes together. Tom was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. We hope to have him with us on November 7th. He has Parkinson's and it's catching up with him pretty badly. He may not make it, but 3 of his squadron mates will be there. And the author will be there doing a book signing, and we will fly our Corsair. His squadron was VF-32 out of Oceania. The modern day VF-A-32 flies F-18s, like Oceania has anything else. And we've invited them to drag a couple of F-18s through the pattern if they'd like to. Biplanes and triplanes, we just got weathered out a few weeks ago with the howling winds and the rain, but it's our second biggest air show, all World War I, sort of a quieter, gentler, slower pace of fall activity. It's a lot of fun. There's our Glenn Curtiss pusher. You know, we've got a lot of aviation history here in Hampton Roads. The very first airplane to ever take off from or land on the United States Navy vessel took off in Willoughby Bay, right next to Norfolk Naval Air Station. And that's the kind of plane that did it. There's the world's bravest man, no parachute, no lap belt, no nothing. Sitting out there in front of this roaring machine. He's out there chasing a hot air balloon on the Dawn Patrol. If you've ever been down, I think it's about 25th Street in Atlantic, there's a statuary part to naval aviation. And one of the statues there is Eugene Healy, who was the pilot of the Curtiss pusher, who took off from, I believe it was the Birmingham, that was at anchor in Willoughby Bay. He didn't know how to swim, so all the photos in the statue have inflated bicycle inner tubes strapped across his chest. He took off he only had like 20 feet on the front of this collier or whatever the ship was. It was at anchor. The weather was so bad, the ship wasn't even moving, so he didn't have the benefit of air coming over the bow. He actually got his wheels wet in Willoughby Bay before he got flying school. Yeah. Go ahead. There's our chief pilot. You can have a wedding anywhere, but if you have it at our place, we bring our open-top London double-decker bus to pick your wedding party up. We'll talk about the planes real quick. Here's the plane that started it all, beautiful Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. Top left is what it looked like when we found it. This is a combat veteran from World War II. It flew with a red star on the side. It was given to the Russians under the Lend-Lease program before America got into the war. It was shot down by a German fighter and sat for 45 years above the Arctic Circle. And 3.5 years later, it is an award-winning flying airplane. That was the very first plane in the collection about 15 years ago. The FAA told Mr. Yagan, okay, you can buy that piece of junk and you can try to restore it if you want, but you can't fly it, even though Mr. Yagan's got thousands of hours in his logbook as a business pilot, because he doesn't have a tail wheel endorsement. Okay? World War II planes typically had their nose in the air to clear the propeller and a tail wheel. Modern planes have a nose wheel and they sit level. It takes a different kind of endorsement, different kind of training. So Mr. Yagan said, okay, he went out and bought 2 World War II trainers, a primary trainer and an advanced trainer. So now he's up to 3 airplanes. And as he likes to say now, it just sort of got out of hand. First question people ask about Mr. Yagan say, he must have a lot of money. And the answer is, well, he used to. B-25, Billy Mitchell, medium bomber, the only American bomber to be named after someone, the proponent of airborne bombardment. He proved his experiments right off the coast here. Wild Cargo is the name of the B-25. This plane was actually used in the 1960s in a television show called Wild Cargo. that featured 3 idiots flying from North America down to South America every week to get zoo animals to deliver to American zoos. It was actually a pretty good show. But she sat in the farmer's backyard for about 25 years. That's what it looked like when we found her, and she now flies again. Okay. This is the plane I wish we had more time to talk about. This is the queen of the fleet, the famous de Havilland Mosquito, or Wooden Wonder. Jeffrey de Havilland came to the Royal Air Force in 1937 and said, "I want to build you a wooden airplane." And they just laughed at him because there hadn't been a wooden airplane since 1920 and they had no interest in it. Well, World War II was in full swing. All the strategic metals were spoken for, and all the men and women that knew how to build planes out of those strategic metals were spoken for. So Jeffrey de Havilland bet his company and built the plane anyway. 90% of the airplane is wood. There's metal in the engine, metal in the landing gear, and metal in some of the struts, but all the wings, all the fuselage are 1.5 inch, 3 plies of balsa spruce and fir. And this was a plane that could be built by pew carvers and cabinet makers. Okay. It's arguably the most important plane of World War II. This one was built in Canada. It was built at the end of the war, never left the country, never saw combat, was immediately junked because all these airplanes were obsolete in 1946, 1947. A farmer bought it for just pennies. I mean, people were buying planes like this in 46 and 47 for less than the cost of the gas in the tanks. People were literally siphoning out the gas and junking the airplane. So a farmer bought this, who knows what he was going to do with it. But 70 years later, it was just a pile of wooden mush and rusted metal in the farmer's field. It had been laying out in the field for 70 years. That's what it looked like when we got it. It fell apart when we put it up on the flatbed truck. It had to be entirely rebuilt. These planes, these wooden airplanes, when you got the plies of the 3 wood together, you steamed the wood and you bent the wood around a concrete mold in the shape of the wing section or fuselage section or whatever, and you just strapped it down, let it dry that way, and 50,000 brass screws later, you got yourself an airplane. The concrete molds had all been destroyed. It took one man 10 years of experimenting, 10 years, just to recreate the concrete molds, so that we could then begin an 8.5-year restoration in New Zealand. Jeez. This is the only mosquito flying anywhere in the world for obvious reasons. We're going to whip through these real quick. P-51 Mustang, we talked about. The PBY Catalina, the same plane that found the Japanese fleet at the Battle of Midway. The famous Corsair. This is, there are no Messerschmitt 262, the world's first combat jet flying. This is a replica, hand-built, every bit of it. And it's as realistic as we can make it. The famous Supermarine Spitfire from the Battle of Britain. The Wildcat, this is what the Navy went to war with. Our FM-2 Wildcat was actually stationed at the Pungo Airfield in World War II. So she's back home. There's a lot more to see. We don't have time to go through the rest of it. I hope you will come back out and see us again at one of our events. And if you do come back out, give me a call first, or if you want to come out as a group, we'll arrange a lunch there. And I'll be glad to take you on the tour myself. Thank you very much.
I'd like to present you a cup of remembrance. Live your life with the 4-way test.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so very, very much. Will you be available after my
Yes, absolutely.
questions?
Absolutely.
Good. We need you to do one last thing, and I have an announcement to make before we depart. You're going to pick. You got yours with you? Have you got yours? Have you got yours with you? One of these 3 numbers, please.
No.
Whoops.
Some
Last
fell.
3 numbers.
Some fell on the floor.
That's okay.
901.
Ah.
Who is it? 901.
Walking right after you.
Who walked in right after Don? Right there.
You ran.
Ladies and gentlemen, next week, we are not meeting here.